I am with the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Juvenile Justice Strategy Group, a senior associate, and I welcome you all to this pre-bid conference on our RFP for juvenile justice reform projects led by young people. We had quite a big number of people signed up for this, so which is very encouraging about the information getting out. I am joined today by two of the young people who were instrumental in developing the concept and the RFP and will be leading the review process. And I'm going to talk a little more about the young people, but please, if you're just coming on, if you can just put your microphones on mute, so we can kind of keep the noise down. When we do turn it over to the questions and answers portion, folks can turn their mics off to ask questions. And they're also welcome to ask questions throughout in the text in the chat box. We did get several questions already forwarded to us in the registration process for this pre-bid conference. So we will be answering those questions first before we move on to taking questions from the floor. Okay, you advance the slide, please. So as I mentioned, I am David Brown with the Annie Casey Foundation. I'm joined today by Anisha Briggs and Darrell Fraser, who are both youth justice consultants and alumni of the Juvenile Justice Strategy Group's third cohort of our Youth Advisory Council. They served on that council for 2 years, finishing their council terms at the spring of last year, but have continued to be engaged with us. And this project and this effort is actually a project that was taken on by that most recent Youth Advisory Council. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, the council was the one that served between 2019 and 2021. This is a complete list picture of all the council members that served during that period. They provided a lot of insights and information for us to help to advance our work. But one of the things we also gave them the opportunity to do was to identify an area of work that they felt was unattended to or underattended to by the foundation or by the Juvenile Justice Strategy Group, and to come up with a project that addressed that. And the project they came up with was an opportunity to provide resources for a youth-led project that would affect juvenile justice reform, keep kids out of the system, or provide supports for kids in the system. And that was you'll see talk more about that. So they came up with the concept, and then a subset of them, including Anisha, Darrell, and Ileana Pujols, then also developed the RFP, which was then issued by the foundation, and we're going to talk more about that RFP, but that's who the young people are. And I will now turn it over to one of the young people to take us to the next, talk about the RFP.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? Again, like David had mentioned, this RFP was a labor of love and something that has been in the works for quite some time. So let's just get right into the description and the purpose. So essentially, this is something that's involved from an initiative led by the Youth Advisory Council members to identify and execute a solution to address underdeveloped or overlooked areas of youth justice. Our goal is to always elevate youth voice as the center of these projects, and especially young people who have been involved in the legal system or have experience with the nationwide juvenile justice system. The goal of the grants that we're looking to receive, or the project we're looking to receive, is to further develop sustainable solutions to juvenile justice reform. And emphasis will be, or priority will be given to projects that address those issues in a sustainable way. So, David, do you want to pass this to go over the grantee eligibility from the Annie Casey side?
Oh yeah, I can do that. I think the most important criteria, of course, is that any applicant must be a nonprofit organization with a 501c3 federal tax status, or have a fiscal sponsor who is a 501c3. That's a key criteria. Want to take the rest?
Yep. So the grantee eligibility also includes a demonstrated organizational capacity and a relevant expertise and a knowledge of youth-led projects, demonstrated engagement with youth leadership and authentic youth engagement and partnership, and a clear commitment to the professional growth of young people, which could be demonstrated through mentorship or other services. So the program elements of interest, it should be led by at least 2 young people between the ages of 15 to 26. That's how we kind of defined youth and ages in regarding to this project. And must have contact with the juvenile justice system. Cannot stress that enough that they should have contact with the juvenile justice system. Preferences for the project are in the following areas: restorative justice and practices, prevention practices that divert youth from their initial contact with the system, expansion of community-based support for young people who are already engaged in the juvenile justice system, and other solutions identified for the youth or community members with direct experience in the justice system. So this is continuing our program elements and interest. So again, they should have demonstrated familiarity with youth justice issues. The organization should have a history of partnering with youth and community members of direct experience with the justice system, have a demonstrated organizational commitment to the work and related to racial and ethnic equity, a demonstrated experience with engaged voices of people often excluded from decision-making, and a level of an extent of leadership in consultation with young people themselves. It can be demonstrated in various ways. So here's some example of the approaches to solutions that we've kind of come up with internally. But again, it's not limited to these solutions, but we just want to kind of give a framework of where this grant could go. So developing a set of trainings, developing and publishing resources, mapping community assets, advancing a piece of legislative reform or policy change, building evidence or research, developing leadership capacity, and launching a pilot program. So evaluation criteria, this, it must address a priority issue in the juvenile justice reform, build from past and present efforts to address issues or achieve solutions, identify system and community partners to support sustainability of the solutions, and engage young people in the project leadership. So awards for this grant will be 2 to 4 grants ranging from $25,000 to $50,000, and were rewarded for an 18-month grant period. So here are some of the key dates to look forward to. The pre-proposal conference, which we are engaged in today. You must notify us of your intent to apply by May 18th. And then the submission of your proposal is due on May 27th. We will be notifying individuals that have passed that initial proposal round on July 26th. And the possible start dates range for the program can be anywhere from August 1st to December 1st. And possible end dates are correlate February 2023 or June 2024.
Anita, we were asked to just go back to this slide that referenced, this, as people wanted to maybe just see that again. Now, and of course, all of this information everything here is actually in the RFP. We're not adding anything at this point that's not in the RFP. Of course, once we get to the Q&A, there may be issues that have arisen that are not articulated directly in the RFP, but everything that Anisha and I already outlined is all explicitly in the RFP. So we can, so we're going to start with just the questions that we have already received in the the people were submitted when they submitted their requests or their registrations for this webinar. The first question I'm going to go through ones that are more related to KC policy and practice, and then the young people will refer to those that more about the initiative and the projects. But the first, should the intent to apply be in a specific format? No, it could just be an email to my attention indicating the intent. And the next question was, what information should be included in the initial intent to apply that we submit to David Brown? All we need is just the name of the organization, the name of a contact, and an email address, and that the fact that you intend to apply for the RFP. That's all we need in the intent. It's mainly for us to gauge how many applications to expect so we can plan the review process accordingly. The next question is, will the grant be one-time award or multiple years? The assumption is that these awards will be a one-time grant, but that does not preclude the possibility of funding the project past that initial year. So it's intended to be 1 year, but it doesn't preclude subsequent grants. If the organization is connected to or funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, are they able to apply? Yes, there's nothing that precludes an organization that is already a grantee or a partner with Casey Foundation from applying for this opportunity. The next question was, for the 10-page proposal, single or double spaced, bibliography, if so, does it count as one of the 10 pages? The proposal can be single spaced for the 10 pages. We don't require a bibliography, but if you choose to include one, that should be part of within the 10-page limit. The next question is, I would like to know if smaller nonprofits can apply for the grant. Yes, there's nothing that limits smaller organizations from applying. In fact, we urge smaller organizations, grassroots organizations, to apply. Next question was, would startup nonprofits be eligible to submit? Yes, a startup would be eligible as long they could be a new organization, as long as they've already have achieved or have applied for their federal 501c3 status, or have a fiscal sponsor that has a 501c3 status. The next question, as for the proposal itself, what structure should we follow, or should we answer the questions outlined in whatever way we see fit? The response to that question is, it would be best to structure your responses in the proposal in the same sequence as the topics are listed in the RFP, just make it easier for review and more likely to make sure we capture all or get all of the answers clearly. Next question was, the indirect rate is 20% for organizations with budgets between 5 and 100 million. What is the indirect rate for organizations with larger total budgets? In this case, a university. Didn't include that. We didn't think we'd get many applications from groups with $100 million budgets or more, but the indirect rate for larger organizations over $100 million budgets would be 15%, not 20%. And the last question that I'm going to answer is there a limit on the number of applications allowed per institution? We have 2 well-aligned programs. And the response is that there's nothing that limits the number of applications that any one organization can submit. However, we'd be unlikely to fund 2 proposals submitted by the same organization. And I'm going to pass it on to Anisha to answer the next set of questions.
Awesome, thank you, David. So the first question that we received was, does it have to be led by a young person, or can it be led by an older person who has justice involvement? And to that, we would say that an older person can be involved, but it can assist you, but it has to be led by at least 2 young people ages 15 to 26. Excuse me, I'm just grabbing my iPad because I have the questions in front of me. May young people, the next question was, may young people be involved in the adult criminal justice system if they are in the 15 to 26 age range, or is the funding limited to projects led by people in the youth justice system? So basically, if they are charged as an adult while still as a juvenile, then yes. Another question we had was, do the youth leaders need to be identified prior to the time of the application? No, they don't have to be identified prior, but priority will be given to organizations that already have ongoing projects with youth, or youth leaders or youth-related projects. will our program be eligible to apply or programs that serve as an alternative to drugs, alcohol, and tobacco use, criminal activity, and other high-risk behaviors. As long as the organization is a 501(c) status and has a fiscal sponsor with a 501(c) status, then yes. The final question for me, or that we have that I'll be kind of guiding is does the organization we work with partners with youth and law enforcement to divert more youth? Is that considered youth-led? If youth are leading the development and implementation of the project, it qualifies. If the applicant is just partnering with the adult leadership team as the youth adjustment or development organization, it doesn't qualify. So in all, we really are putting emphasis on the organizations that are working with youth already, but the projects all have to be have heavy youth involvement or be led by youth in its entirety.
Thank you, Anisha. I can start off with the next set of questions. Once again, everyone, Darrell Frazier. I'm excited to see that we have now 106 participants. So this is really exciting. I'm happy that our reach for this RP have stretched so widely. So the first question that I have is, can applicants partner with other youth serving organizations? Our response is definitely yes, absolutely. We want to encourage collaboration and expand partnerships between other organizations. The second question that I have is that may projects be led by youth who are affected by the criminal legal system through the incarceration of parents? Unfortunately, we're going to have to say no, unless they have also had, some sort of juvenile justice system involvement or something of that nature. Those are the individuals who we are looking to identify as youth to lead this project. The third question that I have is, can you confirm whether or not an institution is limited in the number of LOIs it could submit? We're unlikely to fund 2 proposals from one organization, but we'll consider both. Last but not least, our last question is, what is the impact the Youth Advisory Council is looking to make with this grant initiative? Our response is that JJSG and the Youth Advisory Council alumni, there is currently no longer a Youth Advisory Council. We're aimed to support the expansion of resources, research, and solutions to areas of juvenile justice reform through this grant initiative, while elevating youth leadership and youth adult partnerships in this work as well. And that's a wrap up of the questions, the pre-questions that we had prior to today. I see that we have some questions in the chat. David, would you like to?
Yeah, the first question that I see is, will a program supporting youth aging out of foster care count as justice-involved youth for this grant? I'm assuming Darrell and Anisha will agree that based on that, unless they've also had juvenile justice system involvement, that would not qualify as just because they're foster carers. So that would not, unless they also have juvenile justice involvement, that would not qualify them. Right. And the next question is, how do you define contact with the justice system? Does it count if a youth leader has close family member in the system?
Oh, you want to take that, David, or?
You can take that one.
Yeah, no. So we're looking for youth who have direct involvement themselves, whether that be at the deep end of the system, who have been incarcerated, or if they've been on some sort of probation or with a close family member, such as an incarcerated parent. That's a little different. So
the next question was, can you specify what's meant by area of focus? Is it identifying which areas of youth justice reform we will focus on, or am I misunderstanding the first question, which reads, specify your area of focus? So I think those were the areas that we identified would be priority areas. Those are areas identified by the young people who are on the council as being the areas they're most interested in having projects, but we're not restricting applicant proposals to that area. However, proposals that do fall within one of those areas will be given priority in the review process, but we're not going to disqualify proposals that don't fall in those areas. But those areas are pretty broad, so I think many proposals probably could fit under one of those. The next question is, do the youth have to be hired by your organization, or can they receive a stipend from the grant funds?
Yes, as long as they're getting paid.
Next question, I thought Anisha said if they are charged as an adult, it's okay. Yeah, I think what she said was that if they were had a offense or a charge that while they were a juvenile, but they were ultimately charged in the criminal court, that they would be qualified. If the offense occurred after their 18th birthday or whatever, then and they're charged as adults, that wouldn't. But if they were charged as an adult in the as a juvenile, when they're still a juvenile, they would be included. The next question is, what expenses are allowable and unallowable? Can funds be used to support staff positions that work with youth to lead this initiative? I don't think there's anything that would preclude the funds from going to cover staff costs. There's nothing in that would preclude that. Anisha, Darrell, anything feel differently about that, or?
No, I agree. I would say that as long as it, based on the budget and how you are spending the funds, that is supporting like the youth who are leading on this project simultaneously while supporting the project, I don't really see a problem with that.
So the next question is, will we be able to share the questions and answers that submitted via email? Yes, I think we do plan to document all of the questions that we received in advance and that we receive on this call, and to provide written answers to each, and then we'll post those as an FAQ. We can email that to all of the participants who are on the call, and also we'll post it on the announcement page of the when we announce the initially announce the RFP. We'll put it up there so anybody can have access to these answers, even if they couldn't join this call.
Mm-hmm.
I see Maisie already responded to that. Is a youth court diversion program eligible?
I would say yes. I think within priority areas, we talked about prevention and keeping young people out of the system, out of the kind of the deep end of the system. So I would say yes.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I would say that I just would put an emphasis on how are young people involved in the implementation of the youth court diversion program. What role are they playing? Are they actually leading the work? Things of that nature. So,
agreed.
So the next question was, does station house adjustment fall under JJ involved? So I guess in terms of the eligibility for a young person to participate, if they were diverted from the system at station house, would that qualify as JJ system involved? Do we have a thought? You want to get back on that one, or do you have some thoughts on that?
I would say yes. They had contact with the system, even if it was station involved, they were processed. So,
okay. And just like, if there are questions that come up that we are unable to respond to in the moment, we will convene and respond to those in the written posted response. So the next question I think is a similar one. What if the juvenile had a low level offense but was diverted to our station house adjustment program, but that counts? And I get Darrell just said that would count. Will the Youth Leadership Council for the AECF be reading and scoring the applications? Yes, we will be engaging not only the 3 young people who are developing this RFP, but also other members we hope to recruit to be part of the review process. It'll also include JJSG staff, but I presume that most of the reviewers will be the young people who served on our council or other young people we've worked with. Will you accept indirect costs within the budget? Yeah, the RFP makes explicit that we do pay for indirect costs. It is determined by the size of the organization. For organizations under $5 million, I believe I think in the RFP it says that would be up to 25%, and for those between 5 and 100, it would be 20%, and then over 100 million, it would be 15%. Both youth leaders must have prior court involvement. I think, as Darrell said, it doesn't have to be court involvement, but system contact.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be they don't have to have been involved with the juvenile court, but at least have had contact with the juvenile justice system at even at a preliminary level. Next question is how many grants will be granted. That will be, we can't say precisely, it depends on what we get, but we are suggesting it could be up to 4, but it could be less depending on what we get and the amounts that are requested. Is this the first round of funding for this type of project, or do we have past projects that we can be shared as examples? Okay, this is the first time we've done something like this, because there's an idea that came from the young people, so it's something we hadn't done, that's why they came up with it. So we don't have any past examples of similar projects that we could refer you to. Are stipends to pay youth involved acceptable? You want to take that, Darrell or Anisha?
Yeah, I think we outlined this a little bit. So stipends are perfectly acceptable, but we're definitely going to look and give priority to organizations that are paying at least $15 an hour. And that's kind of cited within how they're organizing their budget.
Will proof have to be provided that youth have been justice involved? Anisha, Darrell, do you have any thoughts about that one?
I would say we can definitely talk about that amongst ourselves. I mean, Anisha, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that let's have an internal discussion on that, and we can
we can definitely get back to you
in the FAQ.
The next one is, are non-youth staff considered in kind for this grant, or can they be paid out of the grant? I think I had questions earlier that yes, the funds could be used for other staff salaries, and also, you know, and stipends could also be used for young people who may be involved in the project who are not necessarily system involved, but as long as you have at least the 2 who have been system involved. So that we're limiting, if we have young people who are involved in the project who haven't been system involved, they could still be compensated for their contributions. Next question is, does the project have to be a new initiative, or can it be an existing project that fits within the RFP? Darrell, Anisha, what are your thoughts?
Anisha, you want to go to first? I would say that it doesn't have to be a new initiative. If it's an existing project that definitely fits into the RFP, then that should be fine.
Agreed.
This question, can you define juvenile contact? What about any volunteer work? I meant juvenile justice. We talked, I think Anisha mentioned earlier what juvenile justice contact. I want you to take that, to repeat that in terms of what you define as juvenile justice contact.
Yeah, and I think we can definitely provide a little more in depth in the RFP, but it could be the deep end of the system is a youth that's been incarcerated, someone who's been on juvenile probation, kind of anywhere within those 2 frameworks of actually being incarcerated to police contact to being inside the court system. But I think we can give a kind of a larger kind of graphic on what those different points of the system may look like.
Yeah, the next question was, can it be more than 2 youth leading? Yes, definitely. That would be great if there were more than 2. It's just, we would see at least a minimum of 2 is a requirement, but it can be more than 2. Next question, are colleges and universities, where is that one?
It says, are colleges and universities
eligible to apply? Our
Right.
college has a foundation with a 501c. Does it? Yeah, there's nothing that would preclude the college from applying. No, we don't. We don't preclude nothing that would preclude that from as an applicant. Let's say utilizing 2 youth who had ankle monitoring fit your definition of justice involved. I'm assuming if that their ankle monitors, then they're under some type of court supervision.
Right.
They're probably maybe awaiting processing by the court or trial, and that would be defined as justice involved. Yes. would it be permissible to allocate the entire budget for wraparound support for youth leaving JDC? I guess JDC would be the Juvenile Detention Center. Is that?
Yeah, sorry, everyone may not be familiar with the acronym JDC. It stands for Juvenile Detention Center, yes, in Ramsey County.
Anisha, Darrell, any thoughts on that one?
And I can elaborate too on my question too. I mean, the thought would just be to give the money to the kids as they're leaving the JDC to use, for wraparound support, to get back into school, to explore different career paths and opportunities, to pay off different things that they may have, fines, etc., just to have as their money. And they wouldn't include any indirect costs or anything for the organization. They would just have that money.
I'll hear from the team on this too, and we can discuss this internally more, but I would say just giving the money over to the young person wouldn't necessarily be the long-term sustainable solution. If there was the development of a pilot program that could be a revenue generating activity or something like that to kind of continuously provide that money to youth leaving the detention center, that would be one thing. But again, we're leaning towards sustainable long-term solutions.
Yeah, I'm a piggyback off Anisha and agree. I would state that especially when it comes to like equity, being rooted in equity to like a capacity building standpoint, like a long term, like Anisha said, like that's a little bit more sustainable. Like whether it's like young people who are kind of like guiding what that process will look like on certain services, like what does wraparound services look like for them, like what are like their most dying needs, et cetera, that they would need as they're reintegrating back into community. I think that will probably be more like sufficient, but I mean, I definitely get what you're saying there. We can talk a little bit more about that, kind of like brainstorm, but.
The next one just says money at least $15 per hour for youth. Yeah, I think we're saying is that we would expect and would be more favorably inclined towards proposals that the young people who are engaged were compensated at least $15 an hour for their contributions. At least. That's not saying, we're not saying that should be the amount, or it could very well be more than that, but I wouldn't want to see anything less than that. Next thing is, how do you define sustainability for this project? I think Anisha already started going there. Do you want to take that one, Anisha?
Yeah, so as far as sustainability goes, we want to make sure, like, obviously there is potentially continuously, there's opportunities for more funding or for the project to gain more funding in the future. Your organization has the organizational capacity to be able to maintain whatever solution they come to. Yeah, I think in terms of that, like, and also we look in terms of replicability too. Can this program be a pilot for other programs or other areas within areas throughout the country?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to avoid there is just things that would just be sustained for the point of the funding and then would have no lasting impact or no lasting result after that. It could be the project, it could have resulted in a legislative or policy change, which is resulting in sustainable change. So it doesn't have to be necessarily an ongoing work, but that there's something that is lasting, that has a sustained impact on the field beyond the initial this investment. Next question is, for clarification, for youth leading this initiative would need to be paid at least $15 an hour, correct? Yes, at least $15 an hour, yes. Okay, UBI would be the model. I guess that's from Elijah regarding the question about the program to provide resources to young people coming out of their JDC. Can you elaborate, give examples on the approaches to solutions? Do you want to say more about that, Anisha or Darrell?
Yeah, so I'm about to say, you want to pull it up? Thank you, Macy. I think that's Macy that pulled this up. So Anisha kind of spoke eloquently earlier around just like some examples of approaches and solutions. So some of them could be, you know, for example, developing a set of trainings, developing and publishing resources, mapping out community assets, advancing legislative or policy change, building evidence or research, developing leadership capacity, or launching a pilot program that can be replicable. And we're very open with this. So, we're as long as it fits the RFP, like the criteria, I'm sure, like, as David stated earlier, the categories are very broad for reasons so that folks, a lot of the work that you all may be doing or the projects that you may be developing for this initiative could probably fall under one of those categories. So.
Yeah, and these are clearly just examples. They're not limited in any way to what folks could propose.
Absolutely.
Next question is, would you consider a mentor-mentee program?
And actually, David, I just wanted to add real quickly to the last question too. I think we are also leaving this open because we want organizations to show us just the levels of that they're actually engaging youth to come up with the solutions for these projects. So, and that's really important because we want these solutions to kind of be led and have youth voice throughout all of them.
Okay, would you consider a mentor-mentee program?
Yes, potentially, but again, if we're looking at solutions beyond it, so the mentor-mentee program, is that something that's going to be a short term within 6 to 8 weeks or within the grant funding timeline? Again, sustainability of that program over time would kind of just be the issue there based on the funding that we have for this grant.
And yeah, we also want to be sure that it was developed and guided and informed implementation by young people, not just that they're participating as either mentors or mentees, but that they're actually were involved in the development and of the initiative. Would you accept proposals that include terms like criminal legal system, or would you prefer that proposals include criminal justice system? Do you have any response to that, Anisha or Darrell?
I don't think that that's a really good question. Anisha, would you like to deliberate on that for a little and then get back to them, or do you have a preference for criminal legal or criminal justice system?
I think we can touch base internally and then.
Yeah, haven't really thought about that. That's a really great question though, as far as like terminology. We can definitely include that in the facts page after we complete this pre-bid.
Next question is, what type of reporting will be required throughout the grant period? Program reporting, financial, both, and how often? Generally, our reporting requirements is that a report is required, both the narrative and a financial report is usually required at the end of the grant period. So depending on how long the grant is. However, if the grant goes beyond 12 months, we'll require a report at the end of 12 months and at the end of the grant period. So if it's an 18-month grant, they'd be required to submit 2 reports. But Darrell or Anisha, you want to talk about what you also expect in terms of the oversight and review by the Youth Advisory Council alum? You put that in the RFP also, that there'd be some quarterly meetings and.
Right. So yeah, it's included in the RFP, like David stated. But yeah, we definitely will be very like engaged in the implementation process, like whether it's even if it's just like a quarterly meeting with the alumni council and the grantees to be able to talk through. I mean, even like the grantees amongst one another to be able to talk through ideas, provide TA support, any type of like guidance throughout the process as you are implementing the programming or initiatives that you are utilizing the funding for. I think that that would kind of be the process. And it's very flexible. So, pertaining to like the rest of the team, like, my colleagues, Anisha and everyone else, we'd be able to kind of work around, everyone's schedule.
So the next question is, if youth leaders will be overage through the course of the grant duration, but currently fit age criteria, can they still be considered initially? And that was one of the questions we anticipated. So you want to take that one, Anisha?
Yeah, so as long as by the grant start date, which Maisie, could you pull up those dates again? By the grant start, youth leaders can't be older than 26. So they have to be by August 1st. And through December 1st, that's kind of when they have to be. But if they, for example, I know myself and Darrell both aged out of the council, but we applied before the age of like 25. So.
Is the grant funding a reimbursement model? No, the foundation grants are made, the full grant is awarded at the time of award. So once we develop a grant agreement, scope of work, and the performance measures are in a budget are agreed to. And once the grant is assigned off by the organization, the full grant amount is provided. And then you have to report on the use of those funds at the end of the grant period or at the end of 12 months. Next one is there a minimum number of young people that need to benefit from the service program awarded a grant? Any thoughts about that, Anisha, Darrell?
I think maybe we can talk about that internally a little bit. As far as the involvement and leadership of young people, there is no minimum number of young people who can help to lead the project. Again,
So it's two.
At least two. But how I'm kind of seeing this question is, how many young people have to benefit from the service or program?
Right.
In terms of that, the project doesn't have to be a service or program necessarily. It can be it can be a project, it can be a pilot, it can be there's a lot of different areas. So I don't necessarily always have to narrow it down to being actually a program or service that's being provided. Did I cover the throw?
Yeah, absolutely. Because even, for example, if it's a policy change that would impact hundreds and hundreds of, like young people across that jurisdiction, in that state. So, the opportunities are endless. We're super open to, the different ways that you all can be able to impact the field. As David stated, as long as we are impacted the youth justice field in some capacity, I think that's like absolutely the key. And then, of course, it being youth led, like co-design by young people, led by young people, et cetera.
And the next question in the chat is, I think it's the last one I see, is, are you guys looking for a specific outcome, specific measurable outcomes?
I think it would vary. It would be based off of what the actual project is. Just kind of hinting towards what we were stating earlier. We didn't want to provide too many restrictions due to the fact that we wanted to kind of keep it broad and open so that folks can have like different ideas, become creative in how they are approaching certain issues. We really wanted to touch issues that are currently not being worked on at the NEEKC Foundation and support individuals who are doing the work. So I would say, that's just my response to that. Anisha, you have anything to add to that, or did I hit it on the nose?
No, I think you hit it right on the nose. I think just to add that whatever the actual content of the work you plan on doing, I think a strong correlation between the outcomes and the actual work is obviously always best practices within grant writing. So again, as long as it connects back to the youth justice system.
And just in terms from the foundation perspective, we do, as I mentioned earlier, each grant will have a defined scope of work and performance measures. And those performance measures usually are expected to be things that are quantifiable, but what they could be would be tailored to whatever the grant is. We're not like saying it has to be a programmatic outcome, for instance, or a youth outcome. It could be a policy outcome or, other things that could be. So it's pretty broad, but it would be tailored to whatever the project is. It's not, we don't have any predetermined set of outcomes we're looking to achieve. So Major, can you take down the slides?
Yeah, we have one more question.
Oh, there's another question that came in? Okay, I'm sorry. What should be included in the intent to apply email that we send to David by May 18th? What information and details do you want to see? Yeah, all we need is just a, you know, a indication by, it could be email just saying that you intend to apply. We need to include the name of the organization that sends to apply, a name of a contact, and that contact's email address. We just, as I mentioned earlier, we just trying to be able to get a sense in advance of how many applications that we could expect so we can plan our review process accordingly. So that's, we don't need much information in the intent to apply. When will this recording of this position become available? I can't, it's hard to say because I mean, it probably doesn't take long for it to be done, but we'd have to work with our internal folks who manage our website to actually put it up. So I can't say precisely when that'll be, but hopefully within the next week. Okay, so I think we've answered all the questions that are in the
We have
chat.
one, David, actually.
There's another one?
Yep, it said, would youth would having youth facilitate restorative justice circles fit within the RFP? And I would say to that, yes, but only if youth are involved in the actual development of the programming or the curriculum for the restorative justice circles. So they have to be involved in the planning, the project planning, the inception, and the facilitation.
Okay. Okay. Also, we can, if anyone wants to ask their questions, any questions verbally, we can open up for that also. Anybody who hasn't had a chance to, who's on a phone or can't access the chat, would like to answer a question, we can take those questions also, if there are any. A little while longer, but if there are no further questions, we can wrap up this pre-bid conference. Once again, I want to first of all thank and acknowledge Darrell and Anisha's efforts in pulling this together and leading this, you know, not only pulling together this concept and also the RFP, and for leading this effort, and also Ileana, who's been their partner on this. And thank all of you for joining us and for your interest. The only thing that concerns me is that there is a lot of interest in this proposal. It is pretty wide open, so it does give a lot of opportunity for folks to apply. So I think, as Darrell said, we're very pleased that we got this broad outreach to folks. There's this much interest. What just concerns me is it's going to be, could be a quite involved review process. And we might, because if we get a lot of proposals, but and it might be, so I do, that's one thing the whole thing that concerns me. Other than that, I think this is great and really appreciate all the interest. And we will, like I said, we will make available any of these, all the questions online and an email to all of the participants. And we will also, if there are any questions that come up in the next few days, don't hesitate to forward them. You can forward them to my attention. My email is in the RFP. And we'll be sure to include those responses also. Okay, I do see a question. Let's see. One other question, will there be preference to those organizations that have worked with justice-involved youth?
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
And it says, oh, another question, just to double check, it's okay to have 4 youth leaders, 2 who were justice system involved and 2 that are not?
I would say yes to that. We're gonna give preferences to organizations that have demonstrated you know, youth involvement, because it just kind of speaks to their already existing values.
Right, I think there's 2 levels of assessment here. One is around what would be qualifying, and then what would be subject to, you know, an evaluation criteria. Clearly, if you have at least 2 young leaders who are system involved, that would be sufficient to qualify. But that's, you'll still be being evaluated against other proposals that may have more youth involved or system involved, and those might get more, evaluation points than one that has fewer. So clearly, for purpose of eligibility, though, as long as you have the two who are system involved, that would be sufficient to be eligible for consideration. The rest would be subject to review criteria.